Look, I think that the trips were all, touch wood, extremely successful. Guyana, of course, is a country that's already very friendly to us. 40% of the population is of Indian origin. We got an amazing welcome, met everybody, the president, the vice president, who is the former president and the head of the ruling party, the prime minister, 11 members of his cabinet, the speaker of the National Assembly, everybody met us, were very warm, very receptive, very friendly, very positive. And so Guyana, in some ways, was the best place to start because it went so smoothly and so easily. Everyone settled into their roles as members of parliament on this delegation. Next was Panama. A little more of a challenge, but they were very receptive, and when we explained things to them, they were totally welcoming. One additional dimension in Panama is they're very keen on strengthening relations with India for reasons of economic development and cooperation, and in that area, definitely, we have a lot to offer, so they were particularly keen on hearing what we had to say. Colombia was a different kind of challenge because they had not been, unfortunately, very supportive. When Pahalgam happened, there was initially no statement. When Sindoor happened, to our surprise and shock, they had issued a statement expressing condolences to victims in Pakistan, who, as we all know, were terrorists, rather than the victims of terrorism in India. So we decided that that was a really important challenge. I took the opportunity of an opening day press conference to express my public disappointment with the statement. And explain that, if there is a need for us to explain our position better to the Colombians, we will do so. And by next morning, I'm very pleased to say when we met the acting foreign minister, she announced that they had withdrawn that statement and that they would speak much more positively of us, which she did. And then, of course, similar meetings with the president of the National Assembly and the sort of legislative infrastructure in Colombia also came through very, very positively, and we were able again to feel well received and well understood and well supported. Brazil was essentially very intense because we arrived on a Sunday when obviously not much is possible in terms of meetings. I had a couple of informal meetings with diplomats I knew previously, but today was a very full, intense day where we had starting off with the diplomatic advisor to the president, who's himself a longest-serving foreign minister in Brazilian history, former defense minister as well, very, very senior figure here, and I fortunately knew him 30 years ago when he was ambassador to the UN, and we've stayed in touch intermittently, so it was an easier conversation to have, and we gave the message of our expectation of Brazilian understanding and solidarity at this challenging time, which we got. Subsequently, we met with the heads of both the Senate Foreign Relations Committee and separately the head of the Lower House Foreign Relations Committee. The head of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee is also the chairman of the India-Brazil Friendship Group, and he was very positive, understandably. The second discussion, we got good questions from them, and that too went very, very well. Then we had the vice president. We also met with the foreign minister, the acting foreign minister earlier, and the acting foreign minister of Colombia had been again very receptive to our message, heard us out, and accepted fully our side of what had happened, and said that Brazil would indeed take this forward. And then we met the vice president of the country, who is not just the number two in their system, unlike ours. The vice president also is a minister and is the Minister for Trade and Industry. He is a former governor of a state called Sao Paulo, the most populous state, where there is a tremendous amount of interest in Indian entrepreneurship and business. There's a big aluminium factory there and so on. And so, again, very warm and friendly, and the conversation went on for about an hour, during which he ended up expressing completely strong and unconditional solidarity with India in its struggle against terrorism. So I must say, looking back on these 4 days, we have been blessed and fortunate that we had really successful meetings everywhere. The next stage is Washington, D.C. We had already been to New York on our way into Guyana. We stopped via New York in transit, and we went to the 9/11 memorial to victims of terrorism to show that we were coming on this crusade, as it were, against terrorism. And that was a good symbolic gesture to begin with, but we're not going back to New York, we're now only in Washington. And in Washington, we have meetings set up with the entire range of public opinion in Washington, government officials, legislators, that is senators and congressmen, various committees in the House and the Senate, think tanks who are very influential in Washington, particularly those focusing on foreign policy, media, and some public addresses like, for example, the National Press Club, where I'll be holding a press conference with some of my colleagues. There's going to be an event at the embassy, in fact, two events at the embassy, one for the Indian community on one evening, and another evening there's going to be an event which will actually showcase India's connection with the sort of influential opinion makers across Washington, some 80 to 100 guests. These are not mainly Indians. The Indians are mainly coming on the 4th. So it's a very interesting mix of people, and I will say that a mix of functions, I beg your pardon, and I will say that it's going to be fairly demanding. I have been asked to spend, though some of my colleagues will leave on the morning of Friday the 6th, I've been asked to spend the rest of the day giving 6 or 7 interviews, 7 or 8 interviews to individual American channels and broadcasters, podcasters, and so on. So that will also give us an opportunity to get our message out. It's a challenging environment. America is a very crowded media space. It's the world news generator. And for them, therefore, our story may not be top of the mind, but if we can get the attention of those who care about South Asia, those who care about India, those who care about terrorism, we can get our message across very, very easily.
So the 3 countries that you recently went were part of the United Nations Security Council,
right?
Non-permanent member, and you will be heading to USA.
3 out of the 4. That is Panama, Guyana, and Colombia.
Now you will be heading to USA, which is a permanent member of
Correct.
the United Nations Security Council. How important does it become for India to give a message to such countries?
No, so the US is important to us at all levels because, frankly, the Security Council, in a sense, is a small part of our relationship with the US, which is huge, whether it comes to trade, whether it comes to defense, whether it comes to intelligence sharing, whether it comes to our participation in the Quad, in the G20. There are just so many avenues in which we cooperate with the US, and then there is the phenomenally important Indian-American community, some 4 to 5 million people of Indian descent in America, who are the largest, most successful ethnic group when it comes to median income and so on. This is a very, very important community, and for us, we will do our very best, obviously, to get our message out to whoever in the US is prepared to listen. It's no accident that the Pakistanis have also sent a delegation abroad, but they're not going to as many countries as the Indian delegations are. They're focusing on what they consider a few key capitals, namely Washington, Brussels, London. That seems to be the thrust of the Pakistani effort. We have gone to all those capitals and more. But when I say we, I don't mean just me, all the other MP delegations. But in Washington, we'll have the interesting phenomenon of the Pakistani delegation in America on almost exactly the same dates. They've been in New York, I believe, today and tomorrow they'll be in New York. Thereafter, yesterday and today, I beg your pardon, in New York. Tomorrow onwards, they will be in Washington while we are in Washington on the same dates. So there's going to be some, perhaps, increase in interest because of the fact there are 2 dueling delegations, as it were, in the same city.
So since this India-Pakistan war, United States is one country that has always been on headlines because of Donald Trump, who has been claiming a mediation or getting a ceasefire between the 2 countries. During our engagements there, will this come up?
How do I know what will come up, Ayushi? We'll have to wait and see what questions people ask. Look, we have enormous respect for the American presidency, and we will speak with that respect in mind. But broadly speaking, our understanding is a bit different. We had consistently said from the very beginning on May 7th that we are not interested in prolonging conflict. This is not the opening salvo in some sort of war. All it is retribution against the terrorists, period. If Pakistan had not reacted, we would not have reacted. That would have been the end of that. Pakistan chose to react with shelling, then we reacted to the Pakistan reaction. And throughout every day, the message was the same from India to everybody who would listen. If they hit, we'll hit. If they stop, we'll stop. We don't want war. We want to focus on our growth and development. This message was given to everybody. Our foreign minister was getting calls from other foreign ministers. He was saying the same thing. So in that sense, no one needed to persuade us to stop. We had already said stop. So if there was any persuasion by the American president or his senior officials, it would have been persuasion of the Pakistanis. They would have had to be persuaded. We don't need to be persuaded because we don't want war. We want to focus on development. That's the basic message.
So Western media seemed to have ignored India's proof of damage to Pakistani assets and relied on Pakistani military briefings. What will you say on Western media hypocrisy, who even called terrorists as gunmen? And since you are going to give interviews there, are you going to change?
Let's wait and see till I actually encounter the Western media rather than telling the Indian media first. But thank you, Ayushi, for the question. I'm forewarned.
Last question. Washington, D.C. also holds headquarters of big financial institutions like World Bank
and IMF. Yeah.
World Bank recently unveiled a $40 billion long-term financial support to Pakistan, and IMF also bailed out recently. What is your assessment on that?
See, we don't begrudge any country its development. If the money is to be spent truly on getting people out of poverty or helping deal with development issues, why would we object? We are humane. We believe in all the sort of well-being of the poorest of the poor in any country. But if that money simply enables Pakistan to divert more resources to supporting terrorism, to arming themselves to attack us, and so on, then it would be most unfortunate. And I hope that the World Bank and the IMF, both of which are bodies in which India does have some influence, I hope they will both be told by our diplomats there that it is extremely important to have complete safeguards to ensure that this money is only spent the way it's supposed to be spent. Money is, after all, fungible, right? Let's say you were going to spend 10 rupees on defense and somebody comes and gives you 20. You will happily take 10 and put the other 10 to defense and save yourself the first 10. This is the kind of human nature. So any lender must take adequate precautions to ensure that their money is only spent for the purposes for which it is being given. Otherwise, frankly, we would not object normally to development assistance per se. Our objection is to the misuse of financial freedoms made possible by this assistance.
So there was also a terror attack in USA in border. What do you say on that?
Well, we immediately reacted. As soon as we saw the reports, the delegation I consulted and I issued a tweet, which they've all retweeted, saying that we express shock and condemn the terrorist attack. We were relieved there was no loss of life. And we endorsed the Secretary of State's message, which is that he said terrorism has no place in our country, and that terrorism has no place in either his country or ours. When we don't believe that terrorism should have any place in any civilized nation. And that message is something we will underscore when we get to America.